23 October 1942. Alamein, Egypt, 2140 hours. 982 British artillery pieces opened fire simultaneously along a 12-kilometer front. The barrage lasts 15 minutes. Approximately 590,000 shells strike German and Italian positions. The sound is audible 100 kilometers away. In a command post 7 kilometers behind the front lines, Lieutenant General Bernard Law Montgomery listens to the bombardment. He does not smile. He does not show excitement. He checks his watch, notes the time precisely, and confirms that the barrage began exactly on schedule. This is important to him. Perhaps more important than the barrage itself. The attack he has planned will involve 195,000 men, 1,029 tanks, and 2,311 artillery pieces. He has spent 6 weeks preparing. Every unit knows its objective. Every tank squadron knows its route. Every artillery battery knows its firing schedule. Nothing has been left to chance. Nothing has been improvised. Montgomery believes wars are won through meticulous preparation, overwhelming material superiority, and absolute refusal to deviate from the plan. He is about to prove this against Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, the most celebrated German commander in North Africa. Rommel believes wars are won through audacity, speed, and exploitation of enemy mistakes. Only one of them can be right. The answer will determine the course of the North African campaign and, to some extent, the entire war in the Mediterranean. But the more interesting question is not whether Montgomery wins. He does. The more interesting question is why a man who wins consistently, who never loses a major battle after El Alamein, who accepts the German surrender in Northern Europe in May 1945, becomes one of the most disliked Allied commanders of the war. The answer is Bernard Montgomery himself. He was born 17th November 1887 in London, son of an Anglican bishop. His childhood was harsh. His mother was cold, emotionally distant, physically punitive. She beat her children regularly. She showed no affection. Montgomery later described her as a very cruel woman. He spent his childhood trying to win approval she never gave. He developed methods to endure this: emotional detachment, rigid self-discipline, complete suppression of vulnerability. These methods served him well in military life. He attended the Royal Military College Sandhurst in 1907, graduated, commissioned into the Royal Warwickshire Regiment. His early career was unremarkable. Adequate officer, strict with men, obsessive about detail. He served in India, learned to endure heat and discomfort without complaint, developed reputation for physical fitness and personal austerity. Then came August 1914. The Great War began. Montgomery deployed to France with the British Expeditionary Force. On 13th October 1914, near Metrin, he led his platoon in an assault on German trenches. A German soldier shot him in the chest. The bullet pierced his right lung, exited through his back. He collapsed. Another soldier fell on top of him, already dead. Montgomery lay pinned under the corpse for several hours before stretcher bearers found him. He nearly died. The lung wound became infected. He developed pleurisy. Doctors expected him to die within days. He survived through what medical staff described as sheer bloody-mindedness. He refused to die. He willed himself through the infection, the fever, the pain. After 4 months, he returned to duty. The experience confirmed his worldview. Survival required discipline, willpower, refusal to submit to circumstances. Emotion was weakness. Sentiment was liability. The soldier who survived was the soldier who controlled himself absolutely. He spent the rest of the Great War as a staff officer. He observed how battles were planned, how orders were transmitted, how operations succeeded or failed. He noticed that failures usually resulted from poor planning, inadequate preparation, or commanders improvising under pressure. He concluded that success required eliminating these variables. Plan thoroughly, prepare meticulously, never improvise. By 1918, he was a lieutenant colonel, aged 31, decorated with the Distinguished Service Order. He had survived the war through competence and discipline. He emerged with absolute confidence in his methods and complete contempt for officers who operated differently. The interwar years saw him rise through peacetime promotion. He commanded battalions, then brigades. He taught at Staff College. He wrote training manuals. He developed a reputation as brilliant but difficult. Subordinates respected his competence and feared his temper. Superiors recognized his ability but found him abrasive, arrogant, impossible to work with as an equal. He had no close friends. He married in 1927. His wife, Betty Carver, provided emotional warmth he could not. They had 2 sons. Montgomery was a distant father, rarely home, focused entirely on his career. When Betty died in 1937 from an infected insect bite, Montgomery grieved intensely but privately. He never remarried. He never discussed her death. He channeled everything into his work. When the Second World War began in September 1939, Montgomery was a major general commanding 3rd Infantry Division. He deployed to France with the British Expeditionary Force. During the German invasion in May 1940, his division performed well during the retreat to Dunkirk. Montgomery maintained discipline, conducted an orderly withdrawal, evacuated his men successfully. While other units collapsed in chaos, 3rd Division remained functional. This performance brought him to Winston Churchill's attention. Montgomery was promoted, given command of Corps, then Army. But his abrasive personality created constant friction. He openly criticized his superiors. He refused orders he considered poorly conceived. He lectured senior officers about proper tactics. He made no effort to be diplomatic or politic. In August 1942, the situation in North Africa was desperate. The 8th Army had been pushed back to El Alamein, barely 100 kilometers from Alexandria. Rommel's Africa Corps controlled most of Libya and threatened Egypt. The British needed a commander who could stop the retreat and launch a counteroffensive. Churchill wanted Harold Alexander as Commander-in-Chief Middle East. Alexander wanted Montgomery for 8th Army. Churchill hesitated. Montgomery was difficult. He antagonized everyone. He would clash with Allied commanders, particularly the Americans when they arrived. But Churchill needed a general who could win. He appointed Montgomery on 13th August 1942. Montgomery arrived at 8th Army headquarters in Egypt on 13th August. He immediately imposed his personality on the entire command structure. He assembled all senior officers. He told them the retreat was over. There would be no more withdrawals. If Rommel attacked, they would fight where they stood. If they lost, they would die at El Alamein. No fallback positions would be prepared. This was not inspiring rhetoric. This was Montgomery's actual tactical assessment. Retreat was no longer viable. The army would stand or be destroyed. The officers understood. The certainty, even if dark, was clarifying. He then began restructuring the entire army. He removed commanders he considered incompetent. He reorganized divisions. He changed operational procedures. He imposed strict discipline on everything from uniform standards to weapons maintenance. Soldiers who had become casual during the long retreat found themselves subject to inspections, drilling, and punishment for minor infractions. Montgomery believed that discipline in small things created discipline in combat. A soldier who kept his rifle clean would keep his head in battle. A unit that maintained formation on parade would maintain formation under fire. This was not proven doctrine. It was Montgomery's personal conviction. He enforced it absolutely. He also imposed his personal lifestyle on headquarters. He woke at 500 hours daily. He exercised rigorously. He ate simple food, mostly vegetables, drank no alcohol. He went to bed at 2100 hours. He expected his staff to maintain similar schedules. Officers who stayed up late planning were reprimanded. Montgomery believed fatigue caused mistakes. He preferred well-rested officers executing adequate plans to exhausted officers attempting brilliant improvisation. His subordinates found this infuriating. War does not operate on regular schedules. Crises happen at midnight. Opportunities appear at 300 hours. But Montgomery refused flexibility. Plans were made during duty hours. Operations commenced on schedule. Emergencies that required waking him needed compelling justification. This rigidity extended to operational planning. For the El Alamein offensive, Montgomery spent 6 weeks preparing. He accumulated material superiority in every category. He had more tanks, more artillery, more aircraft, more supplies. He trained his troops in the specific tactics they would use. He rehearsed the plan repeatedly. Every unit practiced its role. Rommel, by contrast, was sick, undersupplied, and outnumbered. His forces had approximately 500 tanks versus Montgomery's 1,000 plus. His supply lines stretched across the Mediterranean, subject to Allied interdiction. He lacked fuel, ammunition, replacement equipment. He knew a British offensive was coming. He prepared defenses, but he could not match British material strength. Montgomery's plan was methodical, not brilliant, not innovative, just systematic. First, a massive artillery barrage. Second, infantry advanced to clear minefields. Third, armored thrust through cleared lanes. Fourth, exploitation of breakthrough. Fifth, pursuit of retreating enemy. The plan had no flexibility for unexpected developments. If something went wrong, there was no contingency beyond continue as planned. Montgomery believed that with sufficient material superiority and preparation, nothing would go wrong, or if things did go wrong, overwhelming force would compensate. The offensive began 23 October 1942. The artillery barrage was precisely on schedule. The infantry advanced. They encountered difficulties immediately. The minefields were more extensive than anticipated. Clearing them took longer. Casualties were higher. The timetable slipped. Montgomery's response was to continue exactly as planned. No modification, no tactical adjustment, just continue. Apply more force, accept the casualties, keep advancing. This approach was brutal. Infantry divisions suffered approximately 13,000 casualties in the first 4 days. But the advance continued. Rommel attempted counterattacks. Montgomery had anticipated this. He had positioned reserves specifically to absorb counterattacks. Rommel's tanks struck British positions, achieved initial penetrations, then encountered fresh British units with superior numbers. The counterattacks failed. Rommel lost tanks he could not replace. By 2nd November, Rommel's position was untenable. He had lost approximately 500 tanks, most of his artillery, and could not sustain further combat. He requested permission from Hitler to withdraw. Hitler refused, ordered him to stand and fight to the last man. Rommel, pragmatically, ignored this order and withdrew anyway. Montgomery pursued but cautiously. He refused to outrun his supply lines or extend beyond air cover. His critics, then and later, argued he should have pursued aggressively, cut off Rommel's retreat, destroyed the Africa Corps completely. Montgomery argued that reckless pursuit invited counterattack and disaster. He preferred methodical advance with secure logistics. This debate captures Montgomery's entire philosophy. Aggressive pursuit might have destroyed Rommel's army. It also might have resulted in British units isolated, surrounded, destroyed. Montgomery would never accept that risk. He had won decisively at El Alamein. The Africa Corps was retreating. That was sufficient. Further risk was unnecessary. El Alamein made Montgomery famous. Churchill called it the end of the beginning. British newspapers celebrated him. King George VI visited Egypt to congratulate him personally. Montgomery became a national hero, the general who had finally defeated the Germans. He handled fame badly. He began believing his own publicity. He gave interviews claiming personal credit for the victory. He minimized the contributions of others. He suggested that previous 8th Army commanders had been incompetent, and only his arrival had saved the situation. This was partly true, but impolitic to say publicly. Other British generals were offended. His superiors were embarrassed. But Montgomery was popular with the public and successful in battle. He could not easily be removed or censured. He continued commanding 8th Army through the North African campaign, then into Sicily and Italy. In each operation, his pattern repeated: meticulous planning, material superiority, methodical execution, refusal to take risks, inevitable victory at higher cost than more aggressive tactics might have achieved. His subordinates admired his competence and resented his rigidity. His superiors valued his reliability and despised his arrogance. Then in January 1944, he was recalled to England to command ground forces for the Normandy invasion. This position placed him under Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower. It also placed him alongside American generals, particularly George Patton and Omar Bradley. The relationship with Patton was doomed from the beginning. The two men were opposites in every dimension. Montgomery was austere, disciplined, methodical, defensive about British military honor. Patton was flamboyant, aggressive, improvisational, convinced of American military superiority. Montgomery believed wars were won through careful planning. Patton believed wars were won through audacity and speed. Their first significant interaction occurred during the Sicily campaign in July 1943. Montgomery commanded British 8th Army. Patton commanded U.S. 7th Army. The objective was to capture Messina, the key port on Sicily's northeast coast. Both commanders wanted the glory of capturing it first. Montgomery's plan was methodical: advance up the east coast, secure each position, ensure supply lines, eventually reach Messina. Patton's plan was to race across the island. Damn the logistics, get there first. Eisenhower, trying to coordinate both, satisfied neither. Patton reached Messina first, On 17 August 1943, Montgomery arrived shortly after. Patton made sure photographers documented his arrival. Montgomery was furious. He had not been racing. Racing was unprofessional. But Patton had made it a race and won. The humiliation was public. From that point, Montgomery viewed Patton as a showboating cowboy unsuited for serious command. Patton viewed Montgomery as a timid bureaucrat more concerned with his reputation than winning. Neither assessment was entirely fair. Both were emotionally accurate. The animosity intensified during the Northwest Europe campaign after D-Day. Montgomery commanded all Allied ground forces initially. This meant he technically commanded American armies. Patton despised this arrangement. He openly questioned Montgomery's competence. Montgomery retaliated by allocating fewer resources to Patton's Third Army. The conflict came to a head in September 1944 with Operation Market Garden. This was Montgomery's plan, his one major attempt at bold, aggressive operation. The goal was to capture bridges across multiple rivers in the Netherlands, creating a route into Germany that bypassed the Siegfried Line. If successful, it might end the war by Christmas 1944. The operation required airborne forces to capture bridges at Eindhoven, Nijmegen, and Arnhem. Ground forces would advance rapidly up a single road, linking with each airborne position in sequence. Speed was essential. The ground forces had to reach Arnhem within 48 hours. Everything about this plan violated Montgomery's usual caution. Single road meant no alternative routes. Rapid advance meant extended supply lines. Airborne drops meant forces isolated if ground troops were delayed. The plan was Patton's type of operation, not Montgomery's. Montgomery approved it anyway, likely because he wanted to demonstrate he could be bold, possibly because he wanted to beat the Americans to Germany. Definitely because he believed British forces were superior and could execute what Americans could not. The operation began 17 September 1944. The airborne drop succeeded initially. British 1st Airborne Division landed near Arnhem. American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions landed at Nijmegen and Eindhoven. All secured their initial objectives. The ground advance failed immediately. British XXX Corps, commanded by Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks, advanced up the single road toward Eindhoven. They encountered resistance heavier than anticipated. The road was elevated, limiting tactical maneuver. German forces occupied the flanks, firing on the column. Progress was slow. The advance reached Eindhoven on schedule, but Nijmegen took longer. The bridge there required fierce fighting to capture. American paratroopers assaulted across the Waal River in canvas boats, taking heavy casualties. They secured the bridge on 21 September. 2 days behind schedule. At Arnhem, the situation collapsed. British paratroopers landed too far from the bridge. German forces, including the 9th and 10th SS Panzer Divisions refitting nearby, counterattacked immediately. The British secured the north end of the bridge but could not hold it. XXX Corps, delayed at Nijmegen, could not reach them. By 25 September, the position was hopeless. British 1st Airborne Division was surrounded, out of ammunition, suffering approximately 75% casualties. Montgomery authorized withdrawal. Of the 10,000 men who landed at Arnhem, approximately 2,400 escaped. The rest were killed or captured. Market Garden failed. The single road advance proved vulnerable exactly as critics had warned. The timetable was unrealistic. The intelligence about German forces was wrong. The entire operation was exactly what Montgomery usually avoided. Hasty, improvised, dependent on everything going perfectly. Montgomery's response was to blame others. The intelligence failure was not his fault. The weather delayed resupply drops. The American advance at Nijmegen was slower than promised. These factors were true. They were also predictable. Montgomery's usual caution would have accounted for them. His uncharacteristic boldness did not. American commanders were scathing. Patton called it a bad idea executed poorly. Bradley said Montgomery had overreached trying to prove he could be aggressive. Eisenhower, trying to maintain Allied unity, publicly supported Montgomery while privately noting the operation's flaws. Montgomery never admitted the plan was fundamentally flawed. He maintained that Market Garden was 90% successful because most of the bridges were captured. The failure at Arnhem was unfortunate but did not invalidate the concept. This assessment was delusional. An operation that fails to achieve its primary objective is not 90% successful, but Montgomery could not admit major errors. His entire identity was built on competence, preparation, and superiority. Admitting Market Garden was a disaster would undermine this, so he reframed it as a near success, undermined by factors beyond his control. This psychological rigidity became more pronounced as the war continued. By early 1945, Allied armies were advancing into Germany. Montgomery commanded 21st Army Group in the north. Bradley commanded 12th Army Group in the center. Patton's 3rd Army was part of Bradley's command. Montgomery argued constantly for priority and resources. He believed the northern route was strategically superior. He believed British forces were more reliable than American. He believed he should command all ground forces. Eisenhower disagreed on all points. The arguments became bitter. In December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, Montgomery was given temporary command of American forces in the northern sector when German breakthrough split Bradley's command. Montgomery performed competently. He stabilized the line, coordinated the defense, contributed to the eventual Allied victory. But he then held a press conference taking credit for saving the American forces from disaster. He implied that American commanders had panicked and British professionalism had rescued the situation. This was grotesque distortion. American forces, particularly the 101st Airborne at Bastogne, had fought desperately and successfully before Montgomery arrived. Bradley was furious. Patton demanded Montgomery be removed. Eisenhower nearly resigned over the incident. Churchill personally intervened, forcing Montgomery to issue a grudging clarification. The damage to Allied relations was severe. The pattern was clear. Montgomery could not function as part of a team. He needed to be in charge or in opposition. Cooperation, compromise, sharing credit. These were impossible for him. His childhood had taught him that approval must be earned through superiority. His military career had reinforced this. He could only relate to others as superior or inferior, never as equal. This made him an effective army commander. Armies need hierarchy. Soldiers need commanders who exude confidence and competence. Montgomery provided both. His troops trusted him. They knew his plans would be thorough. They knew he would not waste their lives in hasty operations. After the disasters of early war years, this reliability was invaluable, but it made him a terrible coalition partner. The Allied war effort required coordination between British, American, Canadian, Free French, and other forces. It required commanders who could negotiate, compromise, and subsume ego to collective success. Montgomery could do none of these. Eisenhower managed this by largely isolating Montgomery. Give him clear objectives, adequate resources, and minimal interaction with American commanders. Let him plan his operations methodically. Accept his victories. Ignore his arrogance. This worked well enough to reach May 1945. On 4th May 1945, German forces in northwestern Europe surrendered to Montgomery at Lüneburg Heath. He accepted the surrender with characteristic lack of emotion. The cameras captured him reviewing the surrender documents, making notes, asking precise questions about which units were included. No celebration, no triumph, just professional completion of duties. After the war, Montgomery was promoted to Field Marshal, appointed Chief of the Imperial General Staff, later Deputy Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. He continued being difficult. He criticized American strategy during the war. He wrote memoirs emphasizing his own brilliance and others' failures. He gave interviews dismissing Eisenhower's competence. He never married again. He never developed close personal relationships. He lived alone, maintained rigid schedules, exercised daily into his 80s. He died 24th March 1976, aged 88. His funeral was military, formal, precisely organized, exactly as he would have wanted. His legacy is complicated. He never lost a major battle after taking command in North Africa. Alamein, Tunisia, Sicily, Normandy, the Rhine crossing, all were victories. His methodical approach saved Allied lives by refusing reckless operations. His meticulous planning created reliable success. But his inability to work with equals limited his strategic impact. His arrogance damaged Allied unity. His refusal to admit errors prevented learning from mistakes. His emotional rigidity made him incapable of the flexibility modern coalition warfare requires. The comparison with Patton is instructive. Patton was more aggressive, achieved faster advances, took greater risks. He also suffered setbacks Montgomery avoided. Patton's Third Army occasionally outran its supplies, exposed flanks, created vulnerabilities, but Patton could inspire troops in ways Montgomery could not. He could improvise when plans failed. He could adapt to unexpected situations. Montgomery's troops respected him. Patton's troops loved him. That difference mattered. Respect creates discipline and competence. Love creates willingness to die for the cause. Both are valuable. Neither is clearly superior. The deeper question about Montgomery is whether his childhood trauma created his military effectiveness or limited it. The emotional detachment, the rigid discipline, the inability to show vulnerability, these traits made him an effective battlefield commander. They also made him incapable of the human connections that create true leadership. He could command. He could not inspire. He could win battles. He could not win hearts. He could organize victory. He could not share it. At El Alamein, this was sufficient. The Eighth Army needed a commander who would stop retreating and start winning. Montgomery provided exactly that. His methodical preparation, his overwhelming material superiority, his refusal to take risks, these were precisely what the situation required. At Market Garden, his limitations showed. The operation required boldness, flexibility, and acceptance of risk. Montgomery attempted these but could not execute them effectively. His psychology resisted them. The result was disaster. In coalition warfare with the Americans, his personality was actively counterproductive. Alliance requires compromise, shared glory, and acceptance that others' methods might be valid even if different from yours. Montgomery could accept none of this. He damaged Allied unity repeatedly. Yet he was never removed because he kept winning. This is the essential Montgomery paradox. Personally impossible, but professionally invaluable. The general everyone needed but nobody wanted. His own assessment, written in retirement, was that he had done his duty competently and required no praise beyond recognition of results. He had won battles. He had served Britain. He had never wavered. What else mattered? This self-assessment was accurate but incomplete. He had won battles brilliantly. He had also alienated allies unnecessarily. He had served Britain effectively. He had also damaged the coalition that won the war. He had never wavered. But flexibility is sometimes a virtue, not a weakness. The historical verdict remains divided. Military historians praise his operational competence. Strategic analysts criticize his rigidity. Biographers document his abrasive personality. Veterans remember him as competent but cold. All of these assessments are true. Montgomery was simultaneously brilliant and limited, effective and difficult, admirable and insufferable. He was shaped by a childhood that taught him emotion was weakness and approval must be earned through superiority. He spent his life proving this lesson correct, never recognizing it was also poisonous. In the end, he defeated Rommel at El Alamein through meticulous preparation and overwhelming force. He accepted the German surrender in Northwest Europe through steady, methodical advance. He helped win the war, but he could not get along with Patton, or Bradley, or Eisenhower, or almost anyone he considered an equal. He spent his life surrounded by subordinates and superiors, but never peers. He died alone, unmourned except formally, having won every battle except the one for human connection. This was Bernard Montgomery, the Spartan general, the man who beat the desert fox but could not share a meal with his allies without criticizing their tactics, the field marshal who never lost a battle but never won a friend. History remembers his victories. His soldiers remembered his competence. His colleagues remembered his arrogance. All of them were right.